Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your hot takes, your observations, your questions, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. I posted on the YouTube community tab about 24 hours ago. We had a lot of big topics to cover on this week's mailbag. Some of them have to do with the start of Indian Wells. Some of them don't, but it feels like some huge news stories have gone down in the last couple of days. Apologies to anybody who usually listens to the mailbag on your commute because we are well into the weekend now. So hopefully that doesn't inconvenience any of you out there or lead to lower viewership on this. But speaking of viewership, I want to talk about one of the news stories that I just referred to just now that really dropped pretty recent, and I don't think people had a chance to even comment about it in the mailbag. So I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about Halep in general before I start the comments, just because I don't think that there were sufficiently comments about these things, and they just have to be discussed here. So I'm doing a little Muhammad Layani correction, on the comment section. Like, correction, somebody should have commented about this. Netflix, Breakpoint, done. There will be no season 3. At some point, I will probably have more developed thoughts about the show, why it didn't work, how maybe it could have worked, what the challenges were. And I'll get into that, I'm sure, at some point. But right now, what I want to say is the show didn't work. It didn't work. This is not surprising. It never moved the needle. And what I'm about to say kind of has a certain vibe to it that is not ideal. But when somebody isn't invited to the birthday party and then they're like, well, I wasn't going to go anyway. What I'm about to say is kind of like that, but it's the truth. Gruskin and I, the Breakpoint recap show that we did, we were not going to do it again. At least not in the episode by episode kind of format where we were literally doing 30 minutes to 45 minutes on every single episode that dropped. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I think those who watched the show, meaning the Breakpoint recap show, enjoyed it. Some of you even like to say that you enjoyed it more than the Netflix show itself. But the numbers were really bad. Like, relative to everything else I post on YouTube, the numbers when we did that were way, way, way down. So that was just one signal that the show wasn't breaking through, that there just wasn't enough interest. And look, ultimately, I don't think it started off strong enough. I think it lost a lot of people right away. There weren't enough viral moments. Maybe it lacked some star participation, but ultimately, I don't even think that could have saved it. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But that's big news that dropped today. Look, overall, it's sad. It's disappointing. There was a pipe dream that this was going to change tennis like it did F1. The assumption, and I remember saying this at the time, the assumption that that was going to happen wasn't a very good assumption. What I said before the show even dropped was it's got to be good. There's no magic secret formula potion that if Netflix decides to make a docuseries about your sport, it's just going to blow up the sport. It's only going to blow up the sport if people like to watch the docuseries. Particularly people who don't watch the sport like to watch the docuseries. And that was not the case with this one. And I knew it was lights out when I was in Vegas last week, and I didn't see any evidence that Breakpoint existed. I knew the show was over as soon as that was the case. Okay, the Halep news. That was also big. There's one comment about it, but I don't think the comment is very specific, and I just want to cover some of the larger kind of, I want to get the big picture here. So, Court of Arbitration for Sport, we're going to call it CAS, reduced the suspension to 9 months. Now, it's already been 16 months. I believe 16 is the correct number, but I think I might have saw 18 online. My math was 16. Whatever, you get it. It's been more than 9, right? Here is why, because a lot of the time this news goes down, and some of you may have read it, but a lot of folks just read the headlines. So I'll say it's my role to do the dirty work and actually read what was written in this decision. CAS said that the first violation, and remember, the ITIA initially suspended Halep for 2 violations, 2 doping violations. So the first one was the positive test of roxadustat, which I may or may not be pronouncing correctly. And Simona's defense was tainted supplement, and the CAS, they subscribed to Halep's defense. Tainted supplement. They said that she bears some level of fault or negligence, but no significant fault or negligence. And this is language that I've seen used a million times when it comes to the tainted supplement defense, which is by far the most common defense whenever somebody fails a drug test. So violation 1, that one's pretty straightforward. Violation 2 was an irregularity in her athlete biological passport, ABP. And that was completely overturned by CAS, that violation, because she had nasal surgery before her positive test. She had already decided not to play for the remainder of the year. So the logic goes like this. Why would Simona Halep blood dope when she wasn't going to play tennis for the next 3 months? And I'm not an expert on blood doping, but I don't think it has that same effect as, say, an anabolic steroid, which is going to give you long-term gains. So out of competition doping might be of major benefit. I don't think blood doping works that way. I think it mostly has to do with your work rate and your cardio and increasing the red blood cells and blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to get into the science. I don't know much about the science, but that is what the CAS determined, that it would make no sense for her to blood dope, and therefore she is cleared of that charge. So what can we gather from this whole ordeal? I think we can gather that yet another piece of evidence should be submitted that the current doping control system does not work. It is broken. And I think that plays out in 2 ways. First of all, it doesn't catch people who are intentionally cheating. There is one player, his last name Odesnik, first name I forgot, not a very relevant high-level, tour-level pro. He was caught trying to cheat. So one person that I can note, and I'm pretty sure this is it, I'm pretty sure this is end of list, one person has been caught trying to enhance performance through illegal drugs in the history of tennis's doping control program. I don't think anybody believes that only one person has ever taken PEDs. That seems a little bit like a fantasy land, right? And the reason why it probably hasn't caught anybody intentionally cheating is because if you are intentionally doping, you know damn well how to subvert these tests. All this is a technology race, and I think it's very inappropriate, uncalled for, 100% wrong to accuse any individual in tennis of taking performance-enhancing drugs, which happens way too often online, right? The fact is, if you're not caught, nobody should be assuming that anybody is cheating. But again, obviously more than one person in the history of tennis has cheated through these substances. So that's one way that the doping control system certainly does not work. It doesn't catch anybody who actually tried to cheat. The second way it doesn't work is it erroneously derails the careers of many. The ITIA seems to have little regard for context compared to the appeal agencies being the independent tribunals and the CAS. Because Halep's suspension and the reduction of her suspension is now added to a long list of cases that have gone exactly this way. Other than the initial suspension being 4 years, which was something that we don't always see, I can go down the list. Beatrice Haddad Maia, her suspension was reduced. Diana Yastremska, her suspension overturned. Maria Sharapova, suspension reduced. Tara Moore, doubles player, British, suspension overturned. That was earlier this year. I'm going to bring up that case in a moment. Victor Troitsky, that was a weird one circumstantially, but suspension reduced. Marin Cilic, suspension reduced. I am hard-pressed to find an example of a player whose initial suspension was not reduced because in some way the appeals process reveals that they either bore zero fault or negligence for the positive test or some fault or negligence for the positive test, but that there was no intentional doping by the charged party. So if it happens over and over again, if every time the appeal system works, clearly something is wrong, right? I mean, on one side or the other, and I honestly think it's the ITIA side of things, if you are a court of law and every single ruling you hand down eventually gets appealed and either completely overturned or sentence significantly reduced every single time, you're going to start to look at that court with a raised eyebrow. Like, are you going to get any of these right at some point? No, never. You're just going to keep handing down suspensions that are later ruled to be too harsh, too long. And then you have the timing aspect thrown in. What happened to Tara Moore should make you angry. What happened to Halep here should make you angry. Because Tara Moore, 19 months on the sideline, suspension overturned. But was it? Was it really overturned? Because when you miss 19 months, it sounds a lot like a 19-month suspension to me. Halep, she missed either 16 months by my count, 18 months by others, but her suspension reduced to 9. Well, guess what? It wasn't. It wasn't reduced to 9. Because if it was 9 months, she would have returned last July. She would have played the U.S. Open last year. She would have played the Australian Open this year. How can you have provisional suspensions if the period of time that it takes to get the process done, time and time again, or at least on occasion, takes longer than what the suspension ultimately ends up being? I mean, come on now. What are we doing here? So, look, I want to offer solutions. In fact, what I'm doing right now, which is basically complaining, is not something I love to do without at least proposing a way that it can be fixed. But the fact is, this is really, really hard. It's a global sport, independent contractors, no fully established players association or union. The PTPA has commented on this matter. The PTPA has voiced its displeasure with the current systems in place and how it can put Simona Halep in a compromised or a victimized position based on the period of time that it took for the process to play out. But all the PTPA can do is release a statement. The fact is they have no seat at the table, and they do not have enough power amongst the players to organize a labor strike. And if you have neither of those things, you have zero power. All you can do is talk. So global sport, independent contractors, no fully established players association or union. The testing is done by WADA. The rules are written by WADA. WADA is, I'm not going to say I know that they are a highly competent organization. I'm not going to say that I know that they are a highly respected organization, but I am going to say that they are a widely used organization. Probably the most basic and globally trusted doping testing organization in the world. I mean, the Olympics use WADA and tennis uses WADA. So, in theory, that's a no-brainer and that should work, but it's not working. American sports leagues, completely different. They have in-house PED testing programs, which they can customize. Players get a voice in the policy because they have associations and unions. And those players have both a vested interest in a clean sport. They also have a vested interest in fairness. Well, who here has a vested interest in fairness, right? I mean, WADA, it's not incumbent on WADA or the ITIA, both of which are completely independent from the players and the tournaments. They're not really incentivized to fix this. That's all I'll say. So this is a hard issue. I have no solutions, but it's abundantly clear that the current system is broken. All right. I will leave it at that. Let's get to our first comment. It comes from Jeremy Niederhoff. Do you think Nadal should have withdrawn earlier from Indian Wells? Tens of thousands of people took time off work, booked flights and hotels, and bought tickets knowing it was their last chance to see him play. Want to know your thoughts. Let me start with my general opinion on late withdrawals. This is just my take on late withdrawals as a whole. Avoid if possible, right? If you don't have to do it, don't do it, but also not a huge deal. It happens a lot. Players get injured. And when I say a lot, I mean, several times a year, this will happen with a high-profile player at one of the big tournaments. Like late withdrawals happen often because last-minute injuries happen, or maybe not the injury being last-minute, but perhaps it's a 50-50 situation. You think you may be able to play, and then you can't. Didn't just today, Elena Rybakina just had a late withdrawal due to a gastrointestinal issue. So these are very, very common. Avoid if possible. Certainly not a huge deal. A couple years back, because I know that this might be brought up, Djokovic had a late withdrawal at Indian Wells. He was the number 1 seed, and I actually think that did fall into the avoidable bucket. And I think somebody should have told Novak at that time that there is no chance that the COVID border policy in regards to COVID vaccination at the time, no chance that was going to get overturned effective immediately in the 48 hours between the time the draw was made and first ball in the tournament. There just wasn't a chance because, I know how this country works and how those kinds of laws work. And when those laws are changed, there is advance notice, usually months, sometimes weeks, never effective immediately. Somebody should have been able to tell Novak that, who was waiting and hoping that the policy was going to change in time, and then it didn't. And at that time, that was one of those things. I thought that was avoidable. But again, what's really the consequence? If you're a seeded player, it throws the draw off balance. If you're an unseeded player, it doesn't even do that. If you are able to withdraw before qualifying starts, well, then you let an extra player into qualifying. I suppose that is, a good thing that a player gets a chance, but I don't think it's, look, if you're on the border, you're on the border. Your ranking isn't good enough to guarantee entry, so you might get in, you might not. There's no injustice if somebody on the border doesn't get in and then there's a late withdrawal. So like that's my take on it. By the way, one more thing on Novak. He corrected the behavior, right? So he showed himself that he didn't think what he did in that case was really right. Because for Miami, he withdrew before the draw. For the U.S. Open later that year, he withdrew before the draw. And then when the Sunshine Double came around the next year, by that point, the U.S. government had announced when the vaccination requirement was going to be lifted, which was early April. Sunshine Double being March. Novak knew exactly when the policy was going to be reversed, which also proved me right when I said this is never effective immediately. It always is months in advance. So That's the background. Now let me talk about Nadal. And the first thing is this sucks. I feel terrible for all the fans. When it comes to tennis in general, again, it's not the first time this has happened, and it certainly won't be the last. It's a great hazard of our sport that when things happen like this, there's not a great consolation prize. Obviously, you do get another match. Your ticket still means something. Now, in the semis or the finals, you don't even get that. But again, this is a crappy situation, and I feel bad about what you're talking about here with fans, especially. Now, as in regards to how much criticism does Rafa deserve here? First, I want to say I understand that the optics are bad here because of the exhibition. Now, if the exhibition never happened, there's very little you could say. Again, this would just be a typical player trying to get healthy in time for a tournament, thinking either, again, maybe it's on the border, maybe there was a last-minute setback, and then there's a late withdrawal, which it's typical. It happens all the time. Now, he played the Netflix Slam, and that is where, optically, this gets a little bit shaky. Now, he wasn't going full out 100%. If Nadal doesn't play Miami, then it looks even worse, because then it's like, how badly were you injured here if you can't play Miami either? So I get the optics of that. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I don't understand why people are criticizing Rafa, or I'm shocked that people are criticizing Rafa. I'm not that out to lunch. I get it. No, the reason I'm not inclined to come down hard on Rafa is because I don't have information. And I know I don't. People are pretending that they understand what happened here, or that they have the full picture of what happened here. They don't. They have a statement from Rafa on social media that didn't tell us much. There could have been a setback in practice, for example. And you just don't know that didn't happen. Why would it benefit Rafa to withdraw late? Seriously. He came to Indian Wells exceptionally early. He didn't do this at the Australian Open. He withdrew before the draw. He didn't do this in Doha. He withdrew before the draw. You think that he just wanted to screw over his good friend Larry Ellison, who owns Indian Wells? Like, they're really tight, Nadal and Larry Ellison. You think he's just like, yeah, let me stick it to this guy. The fans, let's stick it to them. Yeah. No. I don't see it. I don't understand how it benefits Rafa to withdraw late. Not to get too bogged down in the online discourse here, but why is it that fans of Nadal seem, sympathetic and understanding for Rafa's plight right now, which is a plight to simply be healthy enough to play tennis, one that he is gravely struggling in? Why is it that the fans have sympathy, and, the folks that maybe don't care for Rafa all that much, they resent the fact that he's having injury issues? Isn't that a little backwards? I don't quite get that part of it. Nadal's body has quit on him. I think that much is clear. I think he knows that. I think the evidence suggests that. He just can't stay healthy anymore. Sometimes that happens when you hit a certain age. In fact, it happens to most. Usually it's at a different age. There are a couple ways the end of a tennis career goes. Either you get so slow, or your game declines so much that you lose, and eventually you can't play tour tournaments anymore, and then you retire. That's one way. Usually the greats don't go out that way. Federer did not go out that way. Federer went out in the Wimbledon quarterfinal. Federer never started losing. It just got to a point where it was, I'm going to come back on this date. Never mind, I'm going to come back this date. Not ready yet, this date. Now I'm going to come back and play. Okay, now I need to go for another surgery. Now I'm going to come back. No, I'm not. Okay, now I retire. Like, I know that wasn't a precise summary of how it went down with Roger, but it's pretty darn close. And we're seeing the same thing with Rafa. You think they want to do this? You think they like doing this? Think this is enjoyable? You think it benefits them in some way? That's where I don't get it. How does it benefit Rafa to do this? So ask yourself that. If you can't answer the question, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. Next one is from Brokolobu. Love it. Hi, Gill. It looks like with this court, way faster than last year, players are able to generate a great amount of spin. Do you think that servers like Shelton and Zverev will be able to take advantage of that? Also, do you think Zverev is becoming way underrated? All right, thanks for the kind words. Here's another, please collab with Andy Roddick if that's possible. Don't tell me. You know, I again, as I said, I don't have his email. I haven't asked for his email. I sent the served account a DM on Instagram, has not been returned. I'm a little surprised because I feel like the folks running their social media have certainly, like, you guys have done a good job of trying to make this happen, which I appreciate because I would love to have him on the show. I've said that many times. I would absolutely love it. You guys are, many of you have tried your best to make that known, but yeah, we'll see. So far, I have not been able to get any traction here. All right. The court might not be faster than last year. I know Andy Murray said it. I know Jose Morgado tweeted it. I don't know if somebody else said it, but my first reaction was, really? It's been the same way for what? 15, 20 years? Did they really just change it? So I went to Tennis Insights. I said, hey, do we have any data here? Let's try to figure out if there is any objective evidence that the courts are faster. And the answer is no. Ace rates are down. First serve win percentage, down. Second serve win percentage, down. Conversion score, which is how often do you win when you attack, it is within 0.5% of last year's conversion score. So compared to last year, the stats bear out a slower Indian Wells, which essentially debunks the notion that it's quicker this year, given there's a decent sample size at this point with all of the first round matches having been played. Now, is there a difference, maybe stadium court to outside courts? That is one theory as to why, Murray played on the Stadium 1. So maybe Stadium 1 is quicker, but all the outer courts are playing slower. Something like that could be the case, but right now I'm somewhat unconvinced that the court is faster than last year. Sometimes just a couple people just say stuff, and players are not fully reliable when it comes to court speed. And the reason why I feel very comfortable saying that is because players will contradict each other at the same event all the time. One player will say it's this, another player will say it's that. Well, guess what? One of them is wrong. So I wanted to include this comment because I wanted to give you guys all an update on my investigation into the court speed. I'm not sure Zverev is underrated right now. I think he's rated pretty appropriately. Next question is from Jebamini. Hey, Gil, Medvedev and Zverev are very similar players in their strong backhands and weaker forehands, huge serves, pretty bad volleys, and great movement. If they are so similar stylistically, can you explain why Zverev's best surface is clay, while Medvedev famously hates clay? And then there's another question here, but let me answer that one first. Okay, good question. Medvedev and Zverev, very close stylistically. I would completely agree with that statement. Zverev loves clay. Medvedev does not. Why? The most popular answer you're going to get here is movement. Medvedev, he started to work on it last year, but he didn't know how to slide. From the baseline, he is a highly defensive player who relies on being able to make digs out of the corners and to neutralize when his opponents attack him. And it's just hard for him to do that on clay if he's not comfortable moving on the surface. Zverev is a natural mover on clay. He moves great. So that's the answer that you're going to mostly get. But it also has to do with height of bounce. Medvedev, height of bounce and spin rate. Medvedev is a lot better when his ball is not bouncing high. It's part of how he remains unattackable. It's part of how he does damage when he steps into the court and he is looking to build or finish off the ground. Part of it is how his ball stays low and skids through the court and makes it more difficult to neutralize. But just in trading, it's more difficult to attack Daniil because he has very little net clearance and very little topspin. Ball stays low. But on clay, you just don't get that same effect. The ball usually just pops up a little off the court surface, which tends to be bouncier. And it tends to lose more speed when you hit a flat ball. Zverev plays with much more topspin than Medvedev. That's going to suit the clay courts. The flat ball is going to hurt Medvedev on the clay. So there's your answer. It's the way they hit the ball and the way they move, not one or the other. Second part of this, I also wanted to ask you about Arnaldi. He is 22, which is much older compared to all the other up-and-coming ATP players like Mensik, but he still has a weapon of a forehand, an all-court game, good movement, and volleys as well. Do you have any opinions on the potential this guy has? I heard you say once that you measure talent in terms of how much easy power a player can get, and in my opinion, Arnaldi has a lot of easy power. I don't know that I would have said it like that. That seems a little bit of an oversimplification. So maybe I did say it, but I don't know that I would like to attach myself to that statement at this time. I love Matteo Arnaldi. I just watched him play Alcaraz, actually, right before starting to record this. And he reminds me a lot of Alcaraz. So here, you just called, we just had a question about Medvedev and Zverev and how they're similar. I think Arnaldi and Alcaraz are supremely similar. Matteo is a terrific athlete. He moves extremely well. He has a big forehand. He is pretty creative. He likes to drop shot. He likes to come forward. He mixes in serve and volley. He slices his backhand sometimes. He will throw up a high heavy ball from time to time as well. And his attitude, he seems to genuinely enjoy the game. He plays with a lot of joy. He smiles a lot. He fights very hard. But he's also like Alcaraz in his weaknesses. His serve accuracy is terrible at this time. He does not hit his spots. His shot selection is not very good. I think when I watched him last year, start of last year, he was playing more defensively. And he has a very high work rate. He's willing to grind, and he's a great athlete. So when he plays defensively, it's a pretty good style for him. He can have success, but I think he realized especially off clay, in order to have success, I need to impose my will a little bit. Now he's really looking to use his forehand as a weapon. He's playing more of an attacking style. Do I think he's dialed in an ability to really read the game and, defend when you should defend, trade when you should trade, attack when you should attack, based on the decision makers, incoming ball, your court position, opponent's court position? Do I think he's gotten that down yet? No. So I see Arnaldi as kind of an Alcaraz light. Again, I'm talking stylistic. It's just like, it's the same way that I find stylistically, Djokovic and Nishikori are quite similar. doesn't mean that Nishikori is as good. You guys, I think that concept should be understood. Arnaldi, here's what I've been saying. Prediction is his career high ranking is top 15. That's my prediction. I believe his ceiling, if everything goes perfect in his development, I think he can be top 10. Where do I draw the line? Top 5. I don't really see that for him. So that's my assessment. Prediction, top 15. Ceiling, top 10. All right, next one is from Hardy Har. Hi, Gill. Interested to get your opinion. With the Rublev appeal being successful and his points/money being restored, save for the fine for his unsportsmanlike behavior, I took that essentially as the ATP conceding that the default shouldn't have happened, even if they did not exactly say as much, since they're now treating it as any other lesser penalty, albeit with a fairly pricey fine. I've seen some folks, however, take the wording of the ATP, something like the penalty being too severe beyond defaulting the match, to mean they stand by the default. What do you think? Okay, I'll first answer that. This is a bit of a gray area, I must say. I hadn't really dissected it in this way, but first I'll read you exactly what the appeals committee said. It says, the appeals committee concluded that, quote, beyond forfeiting the match, customary penalties associated with the default, namely loss of rankings points and prize money for the entire tournament, would be disproportionate in this case. I don't know that that is really saying that it was an erroneous default. But let's say it was determined that it was an erroneous default. I don't know if they would say that. So this is a pretty good question, but here's how I interpreted it. I will not lie. When I read that at first, to me it seemed like our policy is not a good policy, and we are now caught red-handed, but we have the power in the appeals process to make up for or make amends for our policy being a bad policy. Like, I'm sorry, but it's just not a good policy that your rankings points and your prize money that were previously accrued go away if you're defaulted. That's a silly policy. What I would much rather see is if you're defaulted, you get a 2-week suspension in the future. Like, what you do, your conduct should come with future penalty. Not, we're going to retroactively take away stuff that you've already, like, for me, this is just logical. That if you're going to impose penalty that goes beyond default from the match, loss of the match, fine, it should be suspension. It shouldn't be rankings, points, and prize money. When those matches that Rublev won before then have nothing to do with what occurred in the semifinal. Okay, there's a next part of this question, which is pretty interesting. It continues. This also connects a question I have about the successful Halep appeal and the idea of restitution for pro players. Obviously, Rublev won his appeal and got the best he could have hoped for, but can never be undefaulted from that match. Similarly, Halep won her appeal and can return to tennis next week if she wants, but can never get back the months beyond her 9-month suspension that she should have been playing. Should there be some restitution system in place for when the ATP determines a wrong decision is made to compensate players for a theoretical monetary loss or reputational damage? This is not to condone Andrey's actions or Simona's negligence, just a genuine curiosity about what a restitutional system might look like and whether you think it's a possibility or even a morally right thing to have in place. I cannot think of any example in all of sports where a restitution policy is something that is routinely utilized. Even when the leagues admit that the officials made errors And there are some leagues like the NBA where it is actually protocol for the league officials to go through the last 2 minutes of the game and issue a public report in the interest of transparency. The NBA it's a very difficult, basketball is a very difficult sport to officiate. So oftentimes these last 2 minute reports are actually chock full of missed calls. But there is no restitution when mistakes are made from a officiating standpoint. Yeah, I can't think of how that would work, and I've never really seen it done. The only restitution that I can think of is if you actually reverse the result of an outcome, which, yeah, I've seen that before in really bad cases, like a team will protest the result of the game in some way. I can't recall an example of that ever being successful. Now, in the Halep situation, the answer to that is to get rid of the provisional suspension, right? You can continue to test the player. If they test positive for a second time, now you have a dirty athlete who is continuing to compete, and I have no problem with removing them from competition at that point. But there should be something in place where in these tainted supplement cases, you do not have the provisional suspension. Just get rid of it. And then when the ruling is established, it goes from there. You serve your time from there. That's the solution that I think would make sense in the case of Halep, and why not, Tara Moore as well, who would not have missed any time because her suspension was completely overturned. Oops. Oh boy, I hit the wrong button and now we're going crazy. Hold on. Bear with me. We're going to go back to this comment from Ron Robbie. Why do you think Rune isn't able to produce good results on outdoor hard courts? He's shown he can play well on outdoor clay, indoor hard, but he has been pretty awful on outdoor hard courts. On paper, he has all the tools to do well, but it just doesn't click for some reason. Happy Sunshine Double. I think in this case, 3 things are true. One is that surely the disparity between indoor and outdoor hard court, which is a wide disparity, surely it can't continue at that extreme clip. It just doesn't make much sense for that to happen. And I don't think there's ever been a player who has gone their entire career with such a large gap. I used to have the number, and I don't right now, but it's significant. Yeah, that won't last. It has to normalize at a certain point. I do think, though, that there are reasons. 2 additional reasons. One is that if you look at the calendar and you pinpoint some of the areas where there is more extreme heat and humidity, Australian summer, North American summer, which are not parts of the calendar other than Rune making the Brisbane final at the start of the year, not parts of the calendar that Holger has really excelled in thus far. Those are the most hot and humid parts of the calendar for players. And Rune's ability to handle that physically has been an area that has certainly revealed room for improvement. The other thing is how aggressively he likes to play on hardcourt. Extremely aggressive. You can look at actually some of the Tennis Insights stats. I know going into the year-end championship, these stats were revealing. Tennis Insights tracks in attack percentage, right? How often, what percentage of points does a player end up attacking? Rune was way up there, very high. He's very, very attacking when he's on hardcourt. I think a lot of the time too desperate to be offensive when he's on hardcourt. But indoors, he's rewarded for that. Outdoors, windy, elements, you're going to miss more. You cannot be as precise. You cannot time the ball as well when you're outdoors. So perhaps that run and gun style of the serve +1, the huge 110 mile per hour second serves, that stuff is not being rewarded as much when he's outside on hard courts. On clay, he has kind of usually dialed back the aggression. I feel like it served him well. I think he should probably take that approach to a certain extent when he's outdoors on hard court, but I'm not sure he's done that as yet. Next one is from Judge Stone. College basketball March Madness holds a unique position in American sports. It's a large field tournament format that produces epic underdog stories, tragic failures, gritty survive and advance dramatics, which all seem to bring out superhuman performances and unpredictable storylines each and every year. Of course, pro tennis runs this same format about 20 times a year, with similarly drastic storylines. But is it overkill to do this repeatedly for 11 out of 12 months? What are a few things a hypothetical Gill Gross commissioner of tennis would attempt in order to elevate and communicate to the public the beautiful drama of tennis and raise the profile of the sport? Well, March Madness is once a year, and it's a very novel concept in basketball to lose and go home. You lose and you go home. That's very novel. The entire season until your conference tournament, you lose and then you go play the next game, and it hurts your record, and that's it. So all of those things, like what you're referring to, is saturation. Tennis is unbelievably saturated. March Madness is not. It is a special moment where even people who don't watch college basketball at all, they watch college basketball for at least 2 to 3 weekends, because it's that time of year. It's March Madness. Can tennis reduce saturation? Should it reduce saturation? I think yes. I think so. Okay, Commissioner of Tennis, Gill Gross. I would shorten the season to 9 months. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, you got to trim it down. It should be 9 months. It should not surpass September. Shouldn't. But that might be tough. So maybe we have to play into the first week of October. Maybe. But you got to shorten it. Maybe with a break in the middle of the season. Masters 1000s. I'd go back to 64 draws, but still hold the events over 9 days. Right now it's 10. I would shrink the draw to 64. No buys. No more buys. Hate buys. 9 days, because it should stretch 2 weekends. There's no doubt about it. It should. Now, you run into a problem if you do that. You have players who are well inside the top 100 who, for theoretically 2 weeks, don't have an event to enter in. They don't have an event. That is a problem. That is why there must be significant investment in the Challenger Tour and an adjustment in the ranking system as well, to make it so that players who do not qualify for Masters 1000s, which will be expanded to 2 weeks, but shrunken to 64 players who do not qualify for that will still have a tour that supports them, provides them decent prize money, enough rankings points to allow them to get into the top 60 where they can now qualify for Masters 1000s. It would really be like you would want to be in the top 55 to be comfortable. Enable bigger venues, great broadcast coverage, very, very important, great broadcast coverage. So that's what I would do. I would reform the Masters 1000s, and I would significantly invest in the Challenger Tour to make up for the disadvantages or the pitfalls that would arise from my ideas of what the Masters 1000s should be. I would also bring back home and away ties in Davis Cup and hold the competition over 2 years. So in a lot of ways, that would, if you think about it, result in a less saturated sport, because you would really take away a lot of the 250s if you organize the calendar. If you shrunk the calendar to 9 months and you kept all the Masters 1000s, you see what I'm getting at here? Yeah. Next one is from Jason Evans. Hey, Gill, what do you make of the recent success of Alex de Minaur? Think you said a while back that you felt his upside was limited due to size and lack of ability to generate pace, though I could be totally wrong. I'm not sure if the surfaces are having a positive impact, but to my eyes, his strategic decision-making seems to have significantly improved. He also seems to be more consistently aggressive, taking the ball earlier and looking to put away the point when there's an opening, rather than his usual grinding and relying on his fitness to outlast his opponent. Thanks. Okay, first of all, everything you said here is true. I did say his upside was limited. I did not think he would be a top 10 player at any point. Certainly not consistently. And in that respect, he looks well on his way to potentially just proving me wrong, which is great. Like, I can't always be right about this stuff. Like, players need to prove me wrong sometimes, and I love it when they do. And de Minaur, right now, he is. But I like what you said about, I think tactical and strategic decision-making is where you hit the nail on the head. Because I don't think de Minaur has just, like, gotten super aggressive. Yeah, he's offensive now. He comes to net. He hits big forehands. He takes the ball early. He's offensive. He's aggressive. I think that would be a total mischaracterization. I think he has the ability now to do that when the circumstances of the match call for it. I think he's better at doing that now. He has bulked up. He's gotten a little stronger in the upper body. That, I think, has helped him get a little bit more speed on his serve, a little bigger on the forehand. Those things are definitely true. He's always been a good net rusher, always. It's just been a matter of figuring out a way to kind of get there, which has been a challenge at times. But I just think he has become one of the smartest, if not the smartest player in tennis. He is an absolute doctor. He will diagnose you. He will dissect you. He will figure out exactly what works, how he needs to play, based on the conditions, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what the score is, what he's doing well, what he's not doing well. And he will commit to whatever tactic necessary. The diversity that I'm seeing in his game plans is what has really stuck out to me about Alex de Minaur in his recent success. Period. That's all I can say about it. That's what's standing out. Last one comes from member Lindsay Andrew. What would it take for you to start breaking down doubles matches on your channel? Greater overall popularity? Andy Roddick said the doubles draw is usually stacked at Indian Wells, so would you consider it for later rounds in this tournament? Replies to this comment. God, please no. Not interested in doubles, please. No, thank you. So that was those were the responses to this reply, or those were the replies to this comment, which I wanted to improve. Ultimately, what would it take for me to start covering doubles on this channel? By the way, I do it twice a year. I do it for Laver Cup, and I did it for United Cup. I did a great breakdown on Laura Siegmund's poaching. I really enjoyed that. That's right. Monday match analysis, Laura Siegmund's poaching. I don't know how many of you still watching this remember that, but I did it. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But yeah, what the reason why I did it in those cases is because people in those events, they care about doubles for a hot sec because they decide the outcome of those events. So doubles suddenly becomes important, and then people care, and then I cover it. Yeah, ultimately what it comes down to is people caring. I don't cover doubles because people don't want me to cover doubles. There is obviously a chicken versus egg thing that exists in all of media. When media decides to cover things, people tend to start caring more. But at the same time, media wants to cover things that people care about so that media can get attention and clicks and viewership, listenership, whatever. The economy of media is obviously reliant on doing things that people care about. If people started really, really caring about doubles, I would start covering it. Do I have a little bit of a less of a knowledge base in doubles or more of a basic knowledge base in doubles? Yeah, I'd say a little more basic than the singles stuff because I have spent countless hours studying the singles game in various ways. I haven't done the same for doubles, so that part is natural. All right, we'll leave it at that. I'm not sure what Monday Match Analysis is going to be this week, but we'll figure it out. Hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.